Budget hearings for Monday, November 27, 2017 will please come to order, and the clerk will call the roll.
Calling the roll, Ms. Brown? Here. Mr. Hairston? Mr. Hairston is absent at the moment. Ms. Simon? Here. Ms. Baker? Here. Mr. Miller?
Here.
Mr. Tuma?
Here.
Mr. Gallagher? Here. Mr. Schrun?
Here.
Ms. Conwell?
Here.
Mr. Jones?
Here.
Council President Brady?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you very much, and Councilman Hairston is expected momentarily. Do we have people signed in for public comment?
We do, Mr. Chairman. The first speaker is Elizabeth Newman.
Great, thank you.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the committee. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Miller, President Brady, and members of council. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share information on the potential impact that flat funding of the Adams Board of Cuyahoga County will have on provider agencies and individuals and families challenged by mental health and addiction disorders. I will summarize my comments this afternoon, but have provided my full testimony in writing. My name is Elizabeth Newman. I am the president and CEO of Circle Health Services, formerly the Free Medical Clinic of Greater Cleveland, and the Centers for Families and Children. Together, Circle Health Services and the centers represent one of the largest outpatient providers of behavioral health services in the state. When combined with our other core service offerings, our staff of over 650 professionals assist over 30,000 people each year through 18 locations across the county. The Adams Board, under the leadership of Valeria Harper, continues to be an essential asset in Cuyahoga County. The board's collaboration with agencies like Circle Health and the centers is at the heart of creating a system of care that provides the right service in the right setting to improve outcomes while lowering overall cost. Every agency providing community-based behavioral health care recognizes these as very challenging, uncertain financial times. As you continue to make adjustments to the existing budget, I would urge you to consider the following. Fighting the opioid epidemic requires additional resources for training and access to treatment, both inpatient and outpatient, and needed wraparound supportive services. I know you are well aware that last year our county lost more people to opiates than to deaths from homicides, suicides, and car crashes combined. We are certainly making some progress on the front line in terms of what happens with our medical doctors, but people are still very much in need of community-based support and care. Medicaid, the primary payer of services for both mental health and substance abuse, continues to be under attack. Many people who are living with these disorders are already low income. Many of them are homeless or inadequately insured. Before the ACA, the only reliable way for them to receive care was when problems were severe enough to merit admission to the emergency room or hospitalization, both very expensive options. Many of the newly insured, or those covered by Medicaid expansion, are seeking health care sometimes for the first time in decades. They require more time, more attention, and more resources. And when we can make these investments, we are saving money in the long run. The impact of behavioral health redesign, the process that is happening at the state level that will change the way that community services are paid for by Medicaid statewide, is very much uncertain. Thousands of Cuyahoga County residents, adults, and children live with severe and persistent mental illness. Effective treatment requires aggressive outreach, intensive case management, and hands-on clinical pharmacy support. The cost of treating mental health conditions is far lower than the cost to the community when these conditions go untreated. We currently face a 14% funding cut from the Adams Board. Thank you for this opportunity.
You may conclude your thought.
Thank you. I think the most important thing for me to leave you with is, as the result of flat funding, there will be a loss of critical services. And essentially, this will impact people across our county, oftentimes resulting in death. I hope you will reconsider this cut. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Councilman Hairston has joined the meeting. And who is the next person?
The next speaker is Janita Simmons.
Welcome to the committee.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Miller, and also the members of the County Council. My name is Janita Simmons. I'm a receptionist at the Alcohol, Drug Addiction, and Mental Health Services, or ADAMS Board of Cuyahoga County. However, I'm not here today as a representative of the ADAMS Board. I'm here to share my personal story as to how mental health treatment has helped me, and to ask you to continue to support mental health and addiction services for others in our county. At 29 years old, an alert doctor in the hospital emergency room diagnosed me with major depression. Tragically, I had begun to feel that I would rather be dead than alive. That very evening, I was hospitalized and started on medication. About 10 years after that, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, again hospitalized and put on different medications. I'm very thankful that I was able to access mental health care. It did help, but at a low point in my illness, I lost my office manager job because I was unable to meet its demands. I worried that I would not be able to continue treatment. I utilized 211 First Call for Help, which was able to direct me to an agency where I could receive treatment without insurance. I was directed to Connections Agency, where I saw a psychiatrist and continued my medication without any lapse. Both First Call for Help and Connections receive funds from the ADAMS Board. I felt isolated just staying at home while trying to recover, but as I began to feel better, I thought that I would like to work again. Social Security directed me to their website, and I was linked to a unique employment network that specializes in helping people like myself with mental illness. I began attending Magnolia Clubhouse, another agency that receives funds from the ADAMS Board. The clubhouse assisted me in moving beyond treatment and into long-term recovery. I received job training, which led to part-time employment, and now I'm employed full-time as a receptionist at the ADAMS Board, where I field telephone calls to staff to help people to access help for mental health and also for substance abuse, just as I was helped with my mental illness. Today I'm doing well, and I'm thankful that I can look forward to a new day. I utilize these services funded by the ADAMS Board, and I know many others that utilize those services as well as others, and they would be lost without the treatment that they need. Increasingly, a recovery-oriented system of care is being made available to help people to maintain long-term recovery. I hope that hearing from me today about how mental health treatment can impact your constituents would encourage you to address the need for additional county funding for these services. It's more critical than ever right now, as the ADAMS Board has had to spend down its reserves dealing with the critical opiate epidemic. Thank you for taking the time to hear my story, and please consider increasing the budget for 2018 to 19 for the ADAMS Board. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Kate Gill and John Buck Kramer.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Miller and members of County Council. Our names are Kate Gill and John Buck Kramer, and we are respectively a small business owner and a physician. We're here today to share how the opiate epidemic has impacted our family, as it has so many others throughout Cuyahoga County. John Buck and I recently sent a letter to all of you as members of County Council sharing a little more about our story. In June 2016, we lost our 22-year-old son to a heroin overdose. He had struggled throughout his teen and adult years with a substance use disorder and mental illness. After an almost one-year period of recovery and successes in school, work, and relationship building, he relapsed, as is common in this chronic relapsing disease. He suffered a severe hypoxic brain injury from the overdose and passed away 3 excruciating weeks later.
Along the way, trying to help Rin through his struggles, we learned a couple of really important things about access to services and prevention. He was availed many resources in Cuyahoga County, But we found that although addiction is a chronic relapsing condition, the treatments available typically are episodic and fragmented. The other thing that we learned in terms of outreach is that the people that are bringing heroin and other opioids into our communities are way ahead of us in terms of outreach. And this was something where they reached him before anyone else could. These drugs are being presented as harmless party drugs to people who aren't out looking for them necessarily. And this is something that we've got to get ahead of.
Over the past year, we have spent time researching evidence-based treatment for addiction as well as dual diagnosis, and there is effective programming out there. For instance, Vermont's hub and spoke system, and there's another model on the East Coast called Aware Recovery Care, and you can read more about that in your copies of this. But both of them are intensive, 1 to 2 year, long-term, home-based, in-the-round recovery resources. And this is the kind of innovative treatments that we need to establish here in Cuyahoga County, in addition to the current programming. Families and individuals cannot manage this chronic illness on their own. We've become aware that the Cuyahoga County Adams Board has received flat funding for the next 2 years. This is especially concerning because we know that the Adams Board has spent down their reserves and will be unable to maintain their current same level of service they've been supporting at a time when the need for mental health and addiction services is greater than ever. We recognize that funding for all the county's departments is tight during this budget cycle. However, we are in the midst.
You may take a moment or two to complete your presentation.
Thank you. We're in the midst of an opiate crisis, and addressing this crisis cannot wait. This is an urgent and immediate need for increased funding for prevention and treatment services on the front side of this. Thank you for taking the time to hear our story and for considering the hundreds of other families like ourselves in Cuyahoga County fighting similar battles.
My sympathies to both of you on your loss, and thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Ms. Jean.
Ms. Liu?
Good afternoon. Glad to come here again to see that lots of departments, their funding will get properly adjusted. But I just found out one thing interesting. For homeless service, the women's shelter, even this dollar amount may be an increase. However, portion of it that will be for frontline to use for 4 months. My question will be, is that really necessary for frontline to continue 4 more months to create more troubles for the people who need help urgently? I would say maybe it would be better just give them 2 months, and part of these money can go to the new service provider who probably will do way better job because they will listen to the homeless people and they will really consider their needs instead of just what a service provider wants to offer. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
That's it.
That's it. Okay. Thanks to all the presenters this afternoon, and we will now move on to item number 4, which is the matter referred to committee, Resolution 2017-0182.
Resolution number 2017-0182, adopting the 2018-2019 biennial operating budget and capital improvements program, and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective.
Thank you very much. That matter is now before us, and we have heard from all the departments, and we heard comments from members of council following those presentations, and council leadership met with council members individually and got their input. And as a result, we have prepared a list of proposed amendments, and I would like to call forward our staff person Trevor McAleer, and he's going to provide us a summary of what the amendments consist of, and we're going to consider these amendments as a proposed single package for your consideration. And I would ask my colleagues if they would to please hold questions until the presentation is completed. It will be fairly concise and brief. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Trevor McAleer, council staff. In front of all of you, you should have a document that looks like this, that line items each proposed amendment. What I was going to quickly do is just go over each one. I've talked with all of you over the last couple weeks about most of these, but just wanted to put it on the official record of what is being proposed today. The first 5 lines are revenue changes to the executive's recommended budget. The first one is for the Department of Development. We are proposing to increase the estimate that is currently in the 18-19 proposed budget on the amount that will be collected from the economic development loans. Currently, there's about $1.5 million or so in the budget, but as we heard in committee in the past, we believe it's going to be closer to $4 million, so we are proposing to increase the revenue by $1.5 million. On line 2, the public defender, this is the state reimbursement amount that we would get back by fully funding the public defender's request of $1.3 million each year. Line 3 proposes to take $1 million out of the revolving loan fund that has a cash balance of close to $5 million in that fund that is currently has been sitting in there for quite some time, and use that to help offset our general fund expenses in the Department of Development. The current recommended budget utilizes some of the money in 18 and 19 from the revolving loan fund. This utilizes another $1 million only in 18. The next line is an additional use of the fiscal office's certificate of title funds in 18 and 19 of the $1 million per year. Again, this is something that is included in the recommended budget at $2 million per year, but we are proposing to use another $1 million in 18 and another $1 million in 19. Line 5 caps what we have been talking about for the first couple years of the rental registry penalty of $50, because as you all heard in previous committee meetings, it can be anywhere between $50 to $150 if you fail to register your property as a rental property. And in the recommended budget, it had a penalty of $150 per year. We are proposing temporarily to cap that at $50. So that's why it's a positive number there, because it would actually decrease the revenue in the executive's recommended budget. Lines 6 through 13 are proposed expense reductions that we are planning on reducing in the executive's recommended budget based off what's currently in front of council for consideration. Line 6 is we are proposing to transfer $250,000 for the payment to privatize the loan servicing collection. Currently in the recommended budget, it is to be paid for out of the general fund. We are proposing to shift that over to the Economic Development Fund, because that are the loans that they will be collecting, which are the loans coming out of the Western Reserve / Economic Development Fund. Line 7, we are proposing to defer the new housing fund that was discussed during the Department of Development's budget hearing. This would allow more time for county council to consider the merits of the housing fund and also discuss if $3 million over the next 2 years is adequate funding or not, but this would defer funding for that. So we would eliminate currently in the recommended budget $1 million for 18 and $2 million for 19. Line 8 reduces the number of new staff that the Department of Development asked for. In the recommended budget, Department of Development was seeking 6 additional staff people. This would eliminate 5 of the 6 FTEs. The one that would be funded would be the Brownfield Sustainability Analysts that the majority of council members have expressed interest in keeping. Line 9 would reduce the contracts line for the Department of Performance and Innovation. Historically, the department has only spent around $100,000 per year. Council has appropriated about $525,000 each year. So this reduction would get them closer to their historical spend. Line 10 would reduce IT's personnel line by approximately $1.1 million, which would get them more in line with their current vacancy rate. Currently, they are budgeted for 2017 at 160 FTEs. They have approximately 135 FTEs filled today, so this would still provide them some flexibility to hire additional staff, but just not at the requested level that they asked for in committee. Line 11, although it's not a technical budget amendment for the recommended 18-19 budget, this would temporarily put a cap on the number of new ERP staff that could be hired until council moves forward with the third-party consultant that all of you know that we currently have an RFQ out to see what recommendations that selected vendor would have on staffing levels for the ERP. Line 12 reduces, completely eliminates the budgeted contingency fund that has been in the budget for the last couple of years, but this would it's currently $2 million, and it is also recommended in the 18-19 budget to stay at the same levels, so this would eliminate the contingency fund. Currently, there are no planned expenses in the contingency fund, so we are okay with eliminating that, and if something does come up, we do have the reserves if needed, if something came up. Line 13 is implement a 10-day voluntary furlough program. Again, it's completely voluntary. It wouldn't be required for employees to participate in this. And if council recalls, in 2010 and 2011, it was mandatory. And then in 2012 and 2013, it shifted to a voluntary furlough program. And it was pretty successful in 2012 and 13, saving almost $1 million per year. We're using a conservative estimate of a total of $500,000. This is $350,000 in the general fund, and you'll see in a couple pages that we have a corresponding Health and Human Services reduction as well. So between the revenue enhancements and the proposed decreases in expenses, you can see that we're proposing a reduction of $7.4 million in 2018 and a reduction of $9.2 million in 2019. So if you can flip over to page 2. Page 2 lists the general fund expenses that currently on the amendments is to either restore or increase in funding based off requests we've received or the need that is currently out there. So line 15 restores the proposal and the executive's recommended budget, and this would keep Metro Health Hospital as the medical provider for the county jail. So we have to restore the $1.5 million per year. Line 16 restores the proposed reduction to privatize the food services for the county jail, and that would be a restoration of $400,000 per year for 18 and 19. As most of you have seen the information that I've shared, there's a number of employees that are at the county jail that are within 5 to 7 years of retiring from the county, so there wasn't a desire right now to look at privatizing the food services in the county jail. Line 17 restores the proposed deferment of the demo fund and keeps the $9 million that is currently in the demolition fund. It would keep that money in there for 17 and would also no longer require the county prosecutor to fund $2 million from the DTAC. When the county prosecutor was here, he had some concerns about the ORC requirement that he keeps so much in his DTAC fund, percentage-wise, And he was concerned that he was getting very close to that legal limit right now, that if he had to contribute the $2 million, that he would drop below the legal requirement. So this would forgive the county prosecutor's office of having to contribute the $2 million into the demo fund. Line 18 restores the educational assistance program to the fully funded level of the last 2 years at $500,000 per year. Line 19 is restoring juvenile court for 2018 at this time to their full requests. So Judge Sweeney came in during her budget presentation and provided follow-up information. And currently juvenile court needs $4.7 million more than what is currently in the recommended budget. The proposal at this time is to fully fund the request in 18 with the hopes of the county executive, county council, and Judge Sweeney getting together and figure out the adequate funding for 2019. So it doesn't provide additional dollars to their 19 recommended budget, but we know probably sometime next year we will have to revisit this. Line 20 restores the public safety grants for public safety. You've received letters from individuals requesting to continue that funding, and that is on the proposed budget amendment list. Line 21 restores the elimination of the vacant CCOMS position. We have heard multiple times in committee how extremely busy CCOMS can get. We all know the stories there, so we believe that it's important to restore this vacant position. Line 22 fully restores the proposed cuts to the Personnel Review Commission. When the director of the PRC testified, she indicated that she would probably have to lay off anywhere between 2 and 3 employees if this cut went forward. And it would, of course, delay the testing capabilities of the PRC. So the amendment here would fully restore the PRC. Line 23 is an increase in funding from previous years, and that would provide an additional FTE to the PRC to help speed up and complete the number of tests that they're capable of doing. So it would be another testing specialist for the PRC. Line 24 is the full $1.3 million that the public defender came in and presented. So this would fully fund the public defender's office as requested. Line 25 increases the soil and water's annual subsidy by $25,000. As a reminder, this $25,000 allows the soil and water to get another $12,500. So the impact of this is actually $37,500. So it's a significant impact to the soil and water group. Line 26 is a request that we got from the Spanish American Committee for funding for an FTE at the nonprofit because they have seen a significant increase in the number of displaced citizens as a result of the hurricane in Puerto Rico. So currently individuals go to this nonprofit who then seek help. How do I sign up for assistance or looking for job placement? So they turn to us, and we've been partnering with the Spanish American Committee over the last couple of months on how to handle this. So this would provide funding for 1 FTE for them to carry out the duties they're currently doing with limited staff. Line 27 is an increase in the development budget to increase the funding to Global Cleveland. All of you received the request of an additional $25,000 for Global Cleveland. We currently fund them at a level $25,000 per year. So this $25,000 increase would take an annual subsidy to Global Cleveland for in a total amount of $50,000. Line 28 is a split staff person who would specialize in IT for the Inspector General's office and the internal audit department. This person would be solely focused on the FTE side or on the IT side of investigations or audits. So currently they don't really have full expertise in this area on their existing staff. It would be a shared FTE, but the person would ultimately report to the Inspector General, just so there's one person that the person would report to. Line 29 is an increase in an FTE solely for the internal audit department. They have requested a senior staff auditor that would allow them to conduct more audits. Typically in a calendar year, they might only get to say 70 or 80% of the planned audits that are approved by the audit committee. And that's standard, but providing another staff person would allow them to complete or begin more audits as necessary. And then finally on line 30 is an increase staff person, Deputy Inspector General for the Inspector General's office, which very similar to the internal audit would just increase the IG's capacity to either complete investigations faster or do more as required, because they never have enough staff people to continue their work. So in total on line 31, you can see the total number of restorations or increases. The total there is approximately close to $20 million over the 2 years, but the majority of that, I want to point out, is the $9 million for the demolition fund that's currently sitting there. If you take the total revenue enhancements and expense reductions, plus what you're adding in terms of new expenses and restorations, over the next 3 years, you're actually adding slightly to the reserves in the general fund by the tune of $175,000 over 3 years. So you're not increase spending, you're actually adding to the reserves on balance over 3 years. The last page of the proposed amendments focuses on the Health and Human Services levy side of the county's budget. And line 35 begins with invest in children, and this is the item around the starting point contract that Director Dorman mentioned during her presentation, that this would have an impact in grading the child care facilities. So there was interest on council to not have that happen and keep things as is. So this would be an increase, or I'm sorry, a restoration of the $500,000. Line 36, as mentioned earlier, is the Health and Human Services portion of the juvenile court that would fully fund juvenile court for 2018. As a reminder, the court is funded both by the general fund and the Health and Human Services levy fund. So that is that portion there on line 36 for 2018. Line 37, this is an increase in funding for senior and adult, Department of Senior and Adult. When Dr. Jones presented his proposed budget, he listed out some options and also followed up with a ranking of options of increased funding if he was able to receive additional funds. His number one priority would be to hire a mental health FTE, and that was his number one option. And I know there's a desire by a majority of council members to include that. So that is fully funded for 18, 19, and 20. In 2019, you see an increase of $300,000, and that is because that would fund the Cleveland Clergy Alliance program that was also presented in committee, and we received subsequent information as requested that I shared with all of you. The reason why it's not in 2018, this would provide the Department of Senior and Adult enough time to get the program up and running, and we anticipate that will be either late in 18 or early 2019. Line 38 is an increase in funding for the number of CTAG schools that would be covered, closing the achievement schools. This would be schools in the Cleveland Municipal School District as well as East Cleveland. This would also fully fund the summer bridge program as well for those 2 additional schools. So when during the summer, CTAG continues to run and work with the children that are at risk. So this would fund the summer portion as well. In line 39, this is one-time funding for a drug awareness and prevention program for a pilot program here at the county to go into the Parmer School District, and it's a new curriculum to help combat the issues that children are facing when it comes to drugs. This actually was recommended by the county's medical examiner that council meet with these individuals, because the question came about, well, how do we stop this early on before this happens? And there's a group that is proposing that has been actually very successful and has data, and we shared that with all of you. So this would be a pilot program in the Parma School District. Line 40 is also a pilot program that would fund Project Love, their Values in Action program that focuses on developing a workforce curriculum in high schools. Right now, they are currently in some schools. It's a nonprofit that this would provide county funding to expand into one additional school. Line 41 is the significant bulk of the proposed increases, and that is around homeless services. As you can see, there's a breakdown in the description, but the biggest portion of that is from shifting from frontline services to run the women's shelter to go with the YWCA, who will begin running the women's shelter in May of 2018. There will be some transition money to provide money for frontline to run the women's shelter over the first 4 months, why the YWCA expands their staff and goes out and hires the necessary people to come in May to start running the women's shelter. So there is one-time transition money in there, and that's why the number goes down from 2.9 million in 18 to 2.2 million in 2019. In line 42, there is a small $3,000 one-time figure in there to purchase the remaining number of lockers needed at the women's shelter. This is something the majority of you have heard about probably for the last 4 or 5 years. We thought the problem was fixed, but it turns out they still have about 25 or so lockers that they need to purchase in order to have enough lockers for the women at the women's shelter. The last two items, line 43, is the HHS portion of the 10-day voluntary furlough. You may recall, the general fund was $350,000. The HHS portion is projected to be $150,000 for a total of $500,000 savings from a 10-day voluntary furlough. And finally, line 44, the last proposed increase in the levy fund is to implement a residential fire alarm program for hearing and vision impaired individuals. This would be open for all county residents that the county would purchase these specialized fire alarms, and we have a nonprofit that is willing to install them for free. So there would be no cost of install, but this would provide for the cost of the actual fire alarms, and it would be a voluntary program, and we're estimating on the need for this, but we have received some data from senior and adult, from Metro Health, and we're waiting to hear back from Cleveland Site Center on just a little bit more data, but this is a pretty conservative number. It might not be that high, but this is the number that we're putting in. It's very similar to, I would correspond the bed bug program that was very successful, and we actually ended up with a waiting list for the bed bug program. So we think this will be very successful as well. In total, over the next 2 years, the list of amendments on the Health and Human Services levy side total approximately $10.1 million. And if you look at reserves on balance at the end of 2019, after this increase, we're still at 16% reserves on balance in the Health and Human Services side. So you legally have to be at 10% based off the current county code. So we're well above that, even with these expenses increase. Finally, the last couple amendments there, line 46, we already discussed this under the reduction, but this just would formalize the $250,000 for the privatizing of the loan servicing collection to the Western Reserve Loan Fund. And then the last two lines in the recommended, executive's recommended budget, there's a proposal to use another $1.5 million out of the casino revenue fund that currently the council and the executive has agreed to use $4 million per year in 16 and 17. And this amendment would take that back down to $4 million, which is approximately half of what is collected every year.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Before I open it up to questions, I have just a couple of comments. One is on the juvenile court, where our strategy is to fully fund the request in 2018 and but not in 2019. The major strategy around that notion is that with the loss of $27 million a year in annual revenue on the Medicaid sales tax policy change, we all have to adjust to operating at new revenue levels, but those adjustments take time. So the idea is that our expectation is that over the course of 2018, that the court will find ways to operate at lower expense levels, which can be implemented by 2019. The second comment is that it is correct that by the end of 2019, we're forecasting to still have a 16% reserve in the HHS levy fund. However, this result is achieved by continuing to draw down PA funds, which by the end of 2019, according to the projection, will be pretty much depleted, and the excess of revenues, or the excess of expenditures over revenues, not including use of PA funds, is somewhere on the order of $15 to $20 million a year. So although we're okay in the short term, we have a definite sustainability problem a little farther out, and we definitely need to be aware of that. With those two comments, I'll open it up to any questions by my colleagues. Ms. Conwell.
I just had one through the chair to Trevor, adding the 175,000 over 3 years. Which one was that?
That's the total of the general fund expense increases and reductions, as well as revenue enhancements.
Okay, so
in
we'll
total.
get that additionally, that 175 every year, or
No,
3
total,
years?
3
Total,
years.
okay. That was my only question.
Other questions? Okay. Well then,
Chairman,
yes.
given, I was going to have something to say a little bit later, but what I did do was make some comments, and that's just that we've had quite a rigorous process here over the last couple of months. I just want to thank all the members of council, all 11 members engaged in this process with each other and with the staff and with the administration. And I just want to thank everybody for all the work and all the time that has to go into that. I think that, this is a very satisfactory budget and well thought out. And I'm proud of it, and I'm proud of the work that the council's done. And so, thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Yes.
And through the chair to Mr. McLear, I don't know if you'll be able to answer this, but in regards to the 10-day volunteer furlough, I'm not quite sure how that works. So each department will be allowed to participate in this 10-day furlough, and how have they balanced in the past of the work versus people being off? So how has that transpired?
It's a good question, Councilwoman. So I can say that it has worked very well in years past. And if you recall, when council first took office, it was one of the first things on the plate that we're going to implement at that time, I believe it was a mandatory 5-day furlough. So you had to take 5 days off, and the employee did not get paid for it.
But we also had a lot of staff then too.
We did have a lot of staff, but the staff significantly reduced and staffing levels, which we can get you this information from 2011 going into 2012, certainly in 2013. I think the county did a very good job in 2012 and 2013 of implementing. You could either pick a 5 or 10-day voluntary furlough at that point, and we were reduced staff from where we were in 2010, 2011. And it worked very well. It saved, I would say the number was a little north of $1 million. I can get you the exact number of employees that participated in it. But it is important at the supervisor and manager level of each department to approve when those days can be taken off. So it is in conjunction with the supervisor, the employee supervisor or manager, to authorize those days off. Because, as we know, there's been an increase in overtime and other issues that the supervisors and managers have to know when the workload increases or when it's a busy period. Say if there's property tax collection that week or so, it's probably not a good idea for the treasurer's office to allow for employees to take that time off. So it really is working a relationship between the employee and his or her immediate supervisor, manager, or even at the director's level.
So do you think that the departments, prior to implementing this, they could actually put notices for the employees to be able to know when it's peak times and when they will not be able to utilize this? Because, on one hand, we kind of need the 10-day voluntary furlough, but I looked at, it also should be some sort of benefit to the employee to be willing to do this. So,
Yeah, I definitely think that's something that we could work with the administration on at a department by department level to ensure, I think, inform the council or the employees of when the option to take the 10-day, it's not 10 straight days. I mean, it might work,
okay.
but some employees take a day off a month. Some employees maybe take it in 2 5-day increments. It doesn't necessarily mean that the employee has to take it 10 straight days. So in
they
the past,
they have the option.
They can, I think, if it's approved by the supervisor or manager. But in the past, I mean, the way I recall employees using it more in 2012 and 2013 is maybe not necessarily all at once, but using it throughout the calendar year.
Yeah, I don't think they allowed them before.
And you have
all
to
the way.
pre-sign up for it, but you let your department know that you're going to participate in it. Then the supervisors and managers will work with those employees to figure out schedules.
And I'm just thinking, would they be allowed to, since we're adding this as a voluntary, would they be allowed to add on any like vacation days or anything added to this? So say they're going through chemo or something and they know that they're gonna,
Yeah.
will they be allowed, I guess, to add on?
Currently, it's my understanding there would be no restrictions to be able to do that. So I know some people that did that, would tag it on if they take 4 vacation days plus a voluntary furlough for the 5th day to take a whole week off or something like that. That wasn't a restriction in years past.
And who's gonna be responsible? Will it fall directly on the supervisors if they do not schedule appropriately and call for some overtime in some areas or departments?
That's a good question. I think that's something that we would have to get back to you on because that's how it was in years past. It's up to the supervisor to approve the time off.
Can we look and see if there was how that worked?
Yeah, I think so.
And
We
if
should be able to
we
get that
had any
information.
overtime due to their scheduling?
Okay.
Okay. So, my colleagues, the next step in the process would be to offer a motion to approve the amendments as a package and to instruct staff to prepare a substitute that would incorporate the amendments. So this would give our approval, but it would not formally yet make them a part of the actual budget language. And so then at the next opportunity, then the amendments would be incorporated by a substitute, which we would then approve. So do we have a motion to approve the amendments?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Okay.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the motion is approved. The amendments are approved. Okay, thank you very much. The next thing that I'd like to do, I'd like to bring to everybody's attention that the Office of Budget and Management has prepared a number of technical, hopefully entirely or almost entirely non-substantive amendments. This happens every time. And we haven't had a chance to fully study them, so we're not going to try to incorporate them today. But I would like to call forth Director Keenan to come and give us a presentation and description of these amendments so that we start to know what they are, and we'll plan on incorporating them at the next opportunity.
Good afternoon, Maggie Keenan, Office of Budget and Management. So we do have some changes that I can email to everybody. They are not significant and they only affect the special revenue funds. These are mostly cleaning up errors that we found in the budget since we've had a couple weeks now to really look at it in more detail. The only significant change is to the Board of Developmental Disabilities. So what was included in the executive's recommended budget had not been approved by the board itself. Their board didn't meet until after we had to submit the budget. So the change that we're proposing is now what the board has adopted for itself. It's about an $8 million difference in increase in 18 and 19 and a $4 million increase in 2020. And we're changing revenue a little bit too. So we can talk about that in more detail, but then the other ones are to special revenue funds in the courts, some of the courts, and then some of our own special revenue funds. Largely, we are either eliminating negative budgets, which we don't want to have, or we are closing out old index codes, and we had dollars show up. Usually it's in the flex line because that's an allocation that runs kind of independently. So we need to zero those out so that we're not over appropriating. Any questions?
Okay, any questions on the technical amendments? Okay, thank you very much. Now, it takes a fair amount of work to take all of this and turn it into substitute language, and so we are not going to try to have that ready to be read on second reading at tomorrow's council meeting. So we're not going to have a formal second reading tomorrow, but everybody has heard the amendments, and we pretty much know what's in the budget. So in an informal sense, the second reading will be tomorrow, and so I would like to ask if somebody would make a motion to refer the budget resolution as amended to the full council with recommendation that it be put on the December 12th agenda for second reading suspension, because we want to meet the mid-December county code deadline for approval of the budget. So I would ask if somebody would make that motion, and then the intent would be that on December 12th, we would first pass the substitute containing these amendments. We would then pass another amendment package, which would be the technical amendments. If there's any further amendments, we would then pass them at that time, and then hopefully we would pass the motion for the final approval of the budget. So do we have a motion to refer the budget resolution as amended to the full council for second reading suspension on December 12th?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Okay. It's been moved and seconded to refer the budget as amended to the full council for second reading suspension for December 12th. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. The ayes have it and it is so recommended. And that's the only legislative item we had on the agenda. Is there any miscellaneous business? Do we have anyone who is requesting to speak on public comment at this time?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay. There being no further business before the committee of the whole, I want to thank everybody once again for all their time, attention, and diligence, and we stand adjourned.